Imagine standing at an airport gate, holding a first-class ticket in hand, only to be accused loudly of faking it. Everyone's watching, judgment in their eyes, and the gate agent's smirk tells you she's already decided you don't belong. What she doesn't know is that the woman she's humiliating is no ordinary passenger. She's about to learn a lesson she'll never forget, but not before the situation takes a dramatic turn. Curious? Let me tell you the full story from Dark Stories. The airport buzzed with its usual chaos, families reuniting, business people rushing to make last-minute calls, and the steady hum of overhead announcements blending into the air. Monica Davis clutched her leather carry-on tightly, her sharp heels clicking against the polished tiles as she approached Gate 27. Her tailored navy suit and silk blouse exuded elegance, but her mind was preoccupied with the meeting ahead. She wasn't just traveling, she was on a mission. As Monica joined the line of passengers waiting to board, her eyes scanned the area with the precision of someone trained to notice the smallest detail. Years of climbing the corporate ladder had taught her to be observant, a skill she had honed during countless board meetings and courtroom battles, but today it wasn't a courtroom she was walking into, it was a test she hadn't anticipated. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and an even tighter scowl, glanced up. The gold nameplate on her uniform read Miss Andrews. Monica noticed the way her eyes flickered over each passenger, a subtle but unmistakable assessment of who belonged in first class and who didn't. Monica stepped forward, presenting her boarding pass with a polite smile. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice smooth and professional. Miss Andrews barely glanced at her before her brows furrowed. She held up the boarding pass as if it were counterfeit currency. "This doesn't look right," she said, loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. Monica tilted her head, her calm demeanor masking the irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "I assure you it's valid. If you check the system, you'll see my reservation." But Miss Andrews didn't move to check the system. Instead, she crossed her arms, her lips curling into a smug grin. "We get a lot of these, people trying to sneak into first class when they don't belong. I'll need to call security to verify." The words struck Monica like a slap, but she held her ground. She glanced at the growing line of passengers, some whispering among themselves, others openly staring. She could feel their judgments hanging in the air as heavy as the oversized luggage someone struggled to shove into the overhead bin. "Call security if you must," Monica said, her voice steady though the sharp edge of indignation seeped through, "but I would appreciate it if you treated me with the same courtesy you've shown the other passengers." Miss Andrews' smirk deepened, a trace of satisfaction in her eyes. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Please step aside." Monica did as instructed, stepping out of the line and standing to the side. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her carry-on as she observed Miss Andrews interacting with the other passengers. A white man in a rumpled business suit approached next, his boarding pass barely glanced at before being waved through. Monica's jaw clenched. Wait, could this get even more shocking? Stick with Dark Stories to find out. A few minutes later, 2 airport security officers arrived, led by a tall man with a buzz cut and a stern expression. His badge read Officer Tyler. "What's the issue here?" Tyler asked, his eyes darting between Monica and Miss Andrews. "This passenger is attempting to board with what appears to be a fraudulent ticket," Miss Andrews said, her tone dripping with exaggerated professionalism. "Fraudulent?" Monica interjected, her composure slipping just slightly. "I paid for this ticket and have the receipt to prove it." Tyler scrutinized her for a moment before holding out his hand. "May I see some identification?" Monica reached into her handbag, pulling out her driver's license and the printed receipt from her purchase. She handed them over, meeting his gaze with a level stare. Tyler examined the documents before passing them back. "Everything seems to check out," he said cautiously. "There is no indication this ticket is fraudulent." Miss Andrews frowned, clearly displeased by his assessment. "Well, I still think it's suspicious. How often do we see someone like her in first class?" The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, their meaning unmistakable. Monica felt a wave of heat rise to her face, but she refused to let it show. Years of enduring veiled insults and coded language had taught her how to mask her emotions, but this was blatant. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, his authority suddenly undermined by the gate agent's bias.
Miss Andrews, if there's no evidence of fraud, she's allowed to board.
I'll need to confirm with the manager, Miss Andrews shot back, already reaching for the phone.
Monica exhaled slowly, her patience thinning but her resolve hardening.
She wasn't just going to board this plane, she was going to address this injustice head-on.
This was no longer about a ticket, it was about principle.
And as Miss Andrews made her call, Monica thought to herself, "You're about to find out exactly who I am." The air around gate 27 seemed to grow heavier as Miss Andrews spoke into the phone, her voice a blend of exaggerated urgency and self-righteous authority. Monica stood to the side, her gaze fixed on the gate agent who cast occasional glances in her direction. Passengers continued boarding, stepping past Monica as though she were invisible or worse, as though she deserved to be where she was. Monica was not invisible, she never had been, but today, in the eyes of Miss Andrews, she was something worse out of place. The two security officers stood awkwardly nearby, exchanging glances but making no move to engage further.
Officer Tyler, the taller of the two, shifted his weight uncomfortably.
Monica caught his expression and saw the faintest flicker of doubt in his eyes, not about her, but about the gate agent. Monica adjusted her blazer, her movements deliberate and measured, as if to reassert her presence in the room. She wasn't one to make scenes, her power came from precision, from knowing when to speak and when to let silence cut deeper than words. Miss Andrews hung up the phone with a loud clatter, her expression triumphant. "The manager will be here shortly," she said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear.
"Until then, you'll remain here, ma'am."
Monica raised an eyebrow, her calm exterior unbroken. "I'll wait," she said simply. Her voice was steady, controlled, but inside she was taking note of every word, every action, every slight.
Minutes felt like hours as the waiting continued. Monica watched as the last of the first-class passengers filed onto the plane. Some threw her sympathetic looks, others avoided eye contact entirely. The line dwindled, and soon the boarding area was almost empty. Finally, a man in a crisp navy suit approached, his stride purposeful. His name badge read Benson, gate manager. He was younger than Monica had expected, his clean-shaven face betraying a hint of unease as he took in the scene. "Miss Andrews, what seems to be the problem here?" Benson asked, his tone neutral but firm. Miss Andrews straightened, clearly relishing her moment of authority. "This passenger presented a ticket for first class that I believe to be fraudulent.
I called security to intervene, but I wanted to confirm with you before taking further action." Monica took a small step forward, her presence commanding without being confrontational.
"Good afternoon, Mr. Benson. My name is Monica Davis.
I provided all necessary documentation, including my identification and proof of purchase. The security officer has already confirmed the validity of my ticket." Benson turned to Officer Tyler, who nodded.
"That's correct. Everything checks out." Miss Andrews's face tightened, her earlier confidence slipping.
"Well, it just doesn't make sense," she stammered.
There was something off about her demeanor. She didn't act like a first-class passenger."
The words hung in the air, their implications ringing louder than Miss Andrews likely intended. Benson's gaze hardened slightly, though he kept his tone professional.
"Miss Andrews, I'll take it from here."
Turning to Monica, he added, "Miss Davis, I apologize for the inconvenience.
Please allow me to personally escort you to the plane." But Monica didn't move.
She looked directly at Benson, her eyes sharp. "Thank you, Mr. Benson, but I think it's important we address what happened here before I board.
This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a problem."
Benson hesitated, caught off guard by her measured assertiveness.
"Of course, let's discuss this privately if you'd prefer."
"Actually," Monica said, her voice firm but still composed, "I'd prefer we address it here. After all, it didn't happen in private."
Benson's face reddened slightly, but he nodded. "Very well." Monica turned to Miss Andrews, her gaze unwavering.
"You accused me of presenting a fraudulent ticket without any evidence. You dismissed the documentation I provided, and when all else failed, you implied that I didn't belong in first class.
Is that correct?"
Miss Andrews opened her mouth to respond but faltered under Monica's piercing stare.
Monica continued, "Your actions weren't just unprofessional, they were discriminatory. And as an employee of this airline, you're expected to uphold policies that ensure fair treatment of all passengers. Benson stepped in, his tone placating. Miss Davis, I assure you this will be addressed. Miss Andrews will be suspended pending an internal review.
Monica inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his words. Good, but I'll be following up personally to ensure that this review is thorough. After all, she reached into her carry-on and pulled out a business card, handing it to Benson.
The color drained from his face as he read the embossed text, Monica Davis, Chief Legal Officer, Atlantic Air. For a moment, there was silence.
Miss Andrews' eyes widened, her earlier smugness replaced by panic. I didn't know, she stammered.
That much is clear, Monica said coolly. She looked at Benson.
Ensure this plane takes off on time, Mr. Benson, and let's make sure no other passengers have to endure what I did today.
Benson nodded hastily. Of course, Miss Davis, right away.
As Monica stepped onto the jet bridge, she felt the weight of every passenger's gaze on her back, but she didn't look back.
She didn't need to.
The message had been sent. The cool air inside the aircraft washed over Monica as she stepped onto the plane, her sharp heels clicking against the floor. The flight attendants greeted her with rehearsed smiles, but she could see the curiosity flickering behind their eyes. It wasn't every day a passenger boarded after causing such a stir. Monica returned their polite nods and made her way to her first-class seat. She slid her carry-on into the overhead compartment and sat down, smoothing her tailored skirt. The leather seat welcomed her like an old friend, its comfort a stark contrast to the tension that had followed her onto the plane. As she adjusted her seatbelt, she noticed the businessman from earlier, the one who had spoken up in the boarding area, settling into the seat across the aisle. He glanced at her and offered a sheepish smile. Glad you made it on, he said in a low voice. Monica returned his smile, her tone warm but reserved.
Thank you for stepping in back there. It wasn't your responsibility, but I appreciate it.
He nodded, then hesitated, as if debating whether to say more.
Finally, he leaned in slightly. You handled that with a lot more grace than I would have. That gate agent was out of line. Monica tilted her head, studying him for a moment.
Out of line is putting it lightly, she said, but it's not the first time I've encountered someone like her.
His expression darkened. It shouldn't happen at all. Monica didn't respond. She didn't need to.
Her silence carried the weight of unspoken truths she had fought against her entire career. The plane began to taxi, and Monica let her head rest against the plush seatback. The hum of the engines was a welcome distraction, a reminder that she was finally moving forward literally and figuratively. She closed her eyes, but her mind was far from restful. Instead, it replayed the confrontation at the gate.
She didn't act like a first-class passenger.
The words echoed in her mind, each syllable a reminder of the prejudice she had faced. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her, and it wouldn't be the last, but today she had been forced to address it not as an attorney, but as a human being. Monica opened her eyes and reached for her tablet. If there was one thing she had learned over the years, it was that preparation was the best antidote to anger. She began reviewing the airline's employee conduct policies, her fingers scrolling through the document with practiced precision. A voice interrupted her thoughts.
Excuse me, Miss Davis.
Monica looked up to see the lead flight attendant, a woman in her early 40s with a calm demeanor and a professional smile.
Yes? I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Benson has asked us to ensure you're comfortable.
If there's anything you need during the flight, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Monica's lips curved into a polite smile. Thank you, but I'll be fine.
The flight attendant hesitated, then leaned in slightly. For what it's worth, I heard what happened back at the gate.
I'm sorry you had to go through that. Monica's smile softened. Thank you, she said. Apologies aren't necessary from you, but they are appreciated. The attendant nodded, then retreated, leaving Monica to her thoughts. The flight was uneventful for the next hour.
Monica worked steadily, annotating sections of the conduct policies and making notes for a report she planned to draft the moment she landed.
She didn't just want Miss Andrews reprimanded, she wanted systemic change.
But just as the plane leveled out, Monica noticed the businessman across the aisle watching her again. He seemed conflicted, his gaze darting between her and his laptop. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I don't mean to interrupt," he said cautiously, "but are you someone important?" Monica chuckled softly, setting her tablet aside. "Depends on who you ask," she said, her tone light. "Why do you ask?" "Well," he said, leaning forward, "you handled that whole situation back there like you'd done it 100 times, and then the gate manager practically tripped over himself when he realized who you were. You don't see that every day." Monica regarded him for a moment, deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she said, "I'm the chief legal officer for Atlantic Air. Situations like that aren't new to me, unfortunately, neither is what caused it." The man's eyebrows shot up. "Chief legal officer? Wow, that explains a lot." Monica shrugged. "Explains why I didn't back down, maybe, but it shouldn't take a title to be treated with dignity." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right about that, but I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't want to be in that gate agent's shoes right now." Monica smiled faintly but didn't respond. She wasn't interested in retribution, she was interested in accountability. And that was a distinction she planned to make very clear in the days ahead. As the flight prepared for landing, Monica felt a sense of calm settle over her. The confrontation at the gate had been draining, but it had also been a reminder of why she did what she did. Every battle, every small victory, was a step toward a world where no one else would have to endure what she had. When the plane touched down and the passengers began to disembark, Monica was one of the last to leave. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the lead flight attendant handed her a small envelope. "This is from Mr. Benson," the attendant said. Monica opened the envelope as she walked, revealing a handwritten note. "Miss Davis, I deeply regret the events of today and assure you they will not be overlooked. Thank you for your patience and professionalism. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything more I can do. Sincerely, James Benson." Monica folded the note and slipped it into her bag. She appreciated the gesture, but she knew this was just the beginning. The real work was yet to come. Monica stepped into the arrivals terminal, the chaos of the airport around her a stark contrast to the clarity of her thoughts. The events of the day played on a loop in her mind, each detail sharper than the last. She moved with purpose, her heels striking the floor with a steady rhythm as she headed for the car waiting to take her to the hotel. A driver stood by the curb, holding a sign with her name, and she offered him a polite nod as she approached. "Good evening, Miss Davis," he greeted, opening the car door with a practiced flourish. "I hope your flight was pleasant." Monica smiled faintly as she slid into the leather seat. "It was productive," she replied. Pleasant wasn't the word she would use. The car pulled into traffic, and Monica retrieved her phone from her bag. She navigated to her email inbox, where a message from James Benson waited at the top. The subject line read "Follow-up from Gate 27." She opened the email, scanning its contents quickly. Benson had wasted no time drafting his apology, emphasizing that Miss Andrews's behavior would be investigated thoroughly. He assured Monica that Atlantic Air valued its passengers and took matters of discrimination seriously. It was the kind of carefully worded corporate response Monica had seen countless times before and often been the one to write. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she tapped out a brief reply. "Mr. Benson, thank you for the prompt follow-up. I will review the outcome of your investigation personally. Please forward all relevant documentation to my office by the end of the week. Best, Monica Davis." She hit send and stared out the window as the city lights blurred past. The apology was a start, but Monica knew that real accountability required more than words, it required action. When Monica arrived at her hotel, she wasted no time settling in. She unpacked only what she needed, her movements methodical as she arranged her laptop and files on the sleek desk by the window. The view of the city skyline went unnoticed as she opened her laptop and logged into the company's internal system. She navigated to the employee training records, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Miss Andrews's file appeared on the screen, and Monica's sharp eyes scanned the data. It was just as she suspected, the gate agent had completed only the bare minimum of the company's mandatory anti-discrimination training. Her performance reviews, however, told a different story. Efficient but occasionally abrasive with passengers, one review read. Needs improvement in conflict resolution and communication, another noted. Monica frowned. The warnings had been there, but no one had acted on them. This wasn't just Miss Andrews's failure, it was the company's failure to address a pattern of behavior before it escalated. She closed the file and leaned back in her chair, her mind working through the next steps. Atlantic Air had policies in place to prevent incidents like the one she had experienced, but policies meant nothing if they weren't enforced. If her role as chief legal officer meant anything, it was to ensure those policies were more than just words on a page. The next morning, Monica arrived at Atlantic Air's regional office, a modern glass building that gleamed in the sunlight. She greeted the receptionist with a nod and made her way to the conference room, where a meeting with the human resources team had been scheduled. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. James Benson was already there, looking more composed than he had at the gate, though his posture was still tense. The HR director, Karen Yates, sat beside him, her expression a mix of professionalism and nervous energy. "Good morning, Miss Davis," Yates said, standing to shake Monica's hand. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us." Monica returned the handshake firmly. "Good morning. Let's get started." As she took her seat, Benson began with another apology. Monica listened patiently but didn't let him linger on it for too long. "Apologies are appreciated, Mr. Benson, but what I'm more interested in are solutions. Let's talk about the steps being taken to address this." Yates cleared her throat, shifting a stack of papers in front of her. "We've initiated a formal review of Miss Andrews's conduct, as well as the training protocols at Gate 27. We've also scheduled additional training sessions for all gate staff to ensure compliance with company policies." Monica nodded but pressed further. "And what about accountability? This isn't just about one employee, it's about a culture that allowed this to happen. Are we looking into why Miss Andrews's previous performance issues weren't addressed sooner?" Benson glanced at Yates, who hesitated before answering. "That's part of the review process. We're also evaluating the oversight mechanisms to prevent similar incidents in the future." Monica leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Good, because this isn't just about protecting passengers, it's about protecting the company. Incidents like this don't just damage our reputation, they expose us to legal liability." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Benson and Yates exchanged a glance, and Monica knew she had made her point. After the meeting, Monica returned to her office and drafted a detailed report outlining her recommendations. She emphasized the need for stricter enforcement of training requirements, more thorough oversight of employee performance, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. As she reviewed the document, Monica felt a sense of satisfaction. The incident at Gate 27 had been a painful reminder of the work that still needed to be done, but it had also been an opportunity to drive change. And if there was one thing Monica Davis excelled at, it was turning adversity into action. She hit save and leaned back in her chair, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. Miss Andrews might have underestimated her, but Monica had no intention of letting that define the story. This wasn't just about one flight, it was about ensuring that every passenger, no matter who they were, could board with dignity. The following days unfolded with the quiet intensity Monica was accustomed to during high-stakes cases. Emails flew back and forth between departments, each message a step closer to unraveling not just what had happened at Gate 27, but why. For Monica, the incident was no longer a personal slight, it had become a catalyst for exposing deeper flaws in Atlantic Air's operations. Sitting in her office, she reviewed the latest findings. The human resources team had provided detailed records of Miss Andrews's employment history, including complaints that had been filed by passengers and co-workers alike. Monica's lips pressed into a thin line as she read through them. Passenger reported being spoken to in a condescending tone. Colleague noted a dismissive attitude toward customers who did not meet her standards. Escalated incident, passenger accused gate agent of racial profiling. The pattern was undeniable. Miss Andrews had been a problem long before Monica encountered her, but the lack of meaningful consequences had emboldened her behavior. Each complaint had been met with a slap on the wrist, a warning here, a note in her file there. No one had taken action to stop the snowball before it became an avalanche.
Monica closed the file, her thoughts simmering.
She wasn't just angry at Miss Andrews, she was angry at the system that had failed to act. This was exactly why she had taken the role of chief legal officer, to ensure that accountability was more than a buzzword. Later that afternoon, Monica called a meeting with Atlantic Air's executive team. The room was filled with the hum of quiet conversations as the executives settled into their seats. Monica stood at the head of the table, her commanding presence silencing the room without her saying a word. "Good afternoon," she began, her tone calm but firm. "As you all know, an incident occurred last week involving a passenger, me, and a gate agent at one of our busiest hubs. While this may appear to be an isolated case, the investigation has revealed deeper issues within our operations." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "The gate agent in question, Miss Andrews, has a documented history of problematic behavior. This includes multiple complaints of discriminatory conduct, which were either dismissed or inadequately addressed. This failure in oversight reflects poorly on all of us, not just the employees directly involved." The room was silent, the weight of her words palpable. Monica continued, her gaze sweeping across the table. "This is not just a PR issue, it's a liability issue. Incidents like this expose us to legal risks and threaten the trust of our passengers and employees. If we don't take decisive action now, we'll be sending a message that behavior like Miss Andrews's is acceptable. And that is a message we cannot afford to send." After the meeting, Monica felt a sense of cautious optimism. The executives had agreed to implement her recommendations, including mandatory retraining for all frontline staff and stricter enforcement of performance reviews. But she knew that real change would take more than policies, it would take a cultural shift. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was an email from James Benson, the gate manager who had witnessed the incident firsthand. The subject line read "Additional follow-up." Monica opened the email and scanned its contents. Benson had taken it upon himself to interview other gate agents who had worked with Miss Andrews. Their accounts painted a damning picture of an employee who had let her biases dictate her actions. "She was always more patient with certain passengers," one agent had said. "She had a way of making some people feel like they didn't belong," another noted. Benson's email ended with a personal note: "Miss Davis, I want to thank you for holding us accountable. This incident has been a wake-up call for me as well. I should have done more to address these issues sooner. I appreciate your leadership and am committed to supporting your efforts to create a better environment for our passengers and staff." Monica sat back, letting the words sink in. Benson's acknowledgement was a small victory, but it was meaningful. It showed that the ripple effect of her actions was starting to take hold. The next week, Monica attended a training session for gate staff at the same airport where the incident had occurred. She had insisted on being present, not as a punitive measure, but as a reminder that accountability started at the top. The room was filled with employees, their expressions ranging from curious to apprehensive. Monica stood at the front, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "I'm Monica Davis, Chief Legal Officer for Atlantic Air. Some of you may have heard about an incident that occurred here recently. I want to make one thing clear: my presence here is not about assigning blame, it's about ensuring that every employee has the tools and support they need to do their job with integrity and respect." She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. "We all have biases, it's part of being human. But when those biases affect how we treat our passengers or colleagues, we fail, not just as employees, but as people. That's why we're here today, to learn, to grow, and to ensure that incidents like the one I experienced don't happen again." The room was silent, but Monica could see the impact of her words in the faces before her. Some nodded, others sat a little straighter, as if realizing for the first time the weight of their roles. As the session ended, one of the gate agents approached Monica hesitantly. She was young, with a nervous energy that reminded Monica of herself at the start of her career. "Miss Davis," the agent said, "I just wanted to say thank you for being here, for speaking up. I think a lot of us needed to hear this." Monica smiled, her earlier resolve softening. "Thank you," she said, "and thank you for being willing to listen. That's where change starts." That evening, as Monica packed her bag to return home, she reflected on the week's events. The incident at Gate 27 had been painful, but it had also been transformative. It had reminded her why she fought so hard for accountability and justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel less than they were. As she zipped her bag and reached for her coat, Monica felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was still much work to be done, but she was ready for it. This was only the beginning. Monica's flight home the next morning felt different. The familiar hum of the engines and the soft rustle of newspapers from fellow first-class passengers should have been comforting, but her mind was too restless. The week had been a whirlwind of meetings, revelations, and difficult conversations, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. As the plane ascended into the clouds, Monica opened her laptop, her fingers gliding over the keyboard. She wasn't preparing another report this time, she was digging deeper into Atlantic Air's internal culture. The file she'd requested before leaving the office contained more than just training records and performance reviews, they included data on how complaints were handled across the organization. Patterns had started to emerge, and they were troubling. By the time the plane landed, Monica had pieced together a clearer picture. Over the past years, complaints about discriminatory behavior had been disproportionately dismissed when filed against senior employees or staff at major hubs. In contrast, similar complaints at smaller regional airports had led to swift disciplinary action. The discrepancy was glaring. As she rode in a car back to her office, Monica made a mental note to confront the HR team about these findings. It was one thing to claim the company had a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, it was another to enforce it equally. She had barely stepped through the office door when her assistant, Karen, approached her with a stack of messages. "Good morning, Miss Davis," Karen said. "Welcome back. These are the calls and emails marked urgent while you were away, and Mr. Benson asked if you had time for a follow-up today." Monica nodded, taking the stack. "Thank you, Karen. Let him know I'll call him at 2 o'clock. Monica settled into her chair and began sifting through the messages. Most were routine inquiries or updates on the Gate 27 investigation, but one email marked confidential caught her eye. It was from an employee who had worked under Miss Andrews in the past. The email began cautiously, "Miss Davis, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly, but I felt it was important to share my experience. I've worked for Atlantic Air for 6 years, and during that time I witnessed several instances of discriminatory behavior by Miss Andrews. Most of the time, complaints were swept under the rug, but there was one case that still haunts me." Monica's eyes narrowed as she read the detailed account of a passenger, a young black man, who had been denied boarding for a business-class flight despite having a valid ticket. The passenger had filed a complaint, but Miss Andrews had written a report suggesting the man had been hostile, which led to the case being closed without further investigation. According to the email, several employees had disagreed with her account but felt pressured to stay silent. Monica's stomach churned. This wasn't just a one-off incident or even a pattern, it was a culture of complicity. At 2 o'clock sharp, Monica dialed James Benson. His voice came through the speaker, calm but tinged with nervous energy. "Miss Davis," he began, "thank you for following up. I wanted to update you on the disciplinary actions we've initiated. Miss Andrews has been placed on unpaid leave pending further review, and we've started additional training sessions for the gate staff." Monica's tone was measured but firm. "That's a start, Mr. Benson, but I need to ask you about something else. I've been reviewing complaints from your hub and others across the network. There seems to be a pattern of inconsistent handling. Why is it that complaints at smaller airports result in action while those at major hubs like yours are often dismissed?" Benson hesitated. "I can't speak to the broader trend, but I'll admit there's pressure at larger hubs to keep things running smoothly. Sometimes that means prioritizing efficiency over other issues." Monica's voice sharpened. "Other issues like ensuring passengers aren't discriminated against? Efficiency doesn't excuse negligence, Mr. Benson. We have a duty to uphold our policies equally, regardless of location." "You're right," Benson admitted, his voice quieter now. I should have pushed back more. I'll do better." Monica sighed. "I'm not here to assign blame, Mr. Benson, but this isn't just about doing better, it's about systemic change. I'll need your cooperation as we dig deeper.
Later that evening, Monica drafted a company-wide memo.
She chose her words carefully, knowing the tone would set the stage for how her findings and the changes to come would be received.
Weeks passed, and the ripple effect of Monica's memo was felt across Atlantic Air. Employees at all levels were required to attend the new training sessions, and the external audit of past complaints was underway. For Monica, the results of the audit were both validating and deeply unsettling.
The data painted a clear picture. Discrimination complaints at larger hubs were often buried under layers of bureaucracy. Managers prioritized efficiency and avoided potential public relations issues by labeling complaints as unsubstantiated.
In contrast, smaller airports with less pressure for perfection handled complaints more transparently.
Monica knew the findings would not sit well with everyone, especially those in upper management who had turned a blind eye, but she was determined to see this through. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss the audit findings. Monica arrived early, armed with a meticulously prepared presentation.
As the directors filed into the room, their faces were a mix of curiosity and apprehension.
When the meeting began, Monica stood at the head of the table, her slides appearing on the large screen, stark graphs and data points highlighting the inconsistencies in how complaints were handled. She laid out her findings with precision, her tone unwavering.
"This is not just a matter of public perception," Monica said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "It's a legal and ethical issue. If we don't address this head-on, we're not only risking lawsuits, we're risking the trust of our passengers and employees."
One of the directors, a man with graying hair and a skeptical expression, leaned forward.
"Miss Davis, these are serious allegations, but is this truly a systemic issue, or are we focusing too heavily on isolated incidents?"
Monica met his gaze without flinching.
"With all due respect, the data doesn't lie.
Over the past 3 years, 68% of complaints at major hubs were dismissed without investigation, compared to 23% at regional airports.
This is systemic."
A murmur rippled through the room. Another director, a woman known for her pragmatism, spoke up.
"What's your proposed solution, Miss Davis?" Monica clicked to the next slide. "First, we implement mandatory oversight for all complaints. Every dismissal must be reviewed by the newly established Accountability Committee. Second, we create a direct line for employees and passengers to report incidents to a neutral third party. Finally, we commit to a quarterly review of complaint handling, with results shared transparently across the company."
The room fell silent as the directors absorbed her words. Finally, the chairman of the board nodded. "This is going to be a significant cultural shift, but I agree it's necessary."
Let's move forward with Miss Davis's recommendations. Back at her office, Monica reviewed the email she'd been dreading, the final decision regarding Miss Andrews.
The gate agent had been officially terminated not just for her actions at Gate 27, but for the pattern of misconduct uncovered during the investigation. While Monica felt a sense of justice, she also knew this was just one part of the broader problem.
Miss Andrews had been a symptom of a culture that allowed bias to thrive.
The real victory would come in preventing such behavior from taking root in the first place. That evening, as Monica was wrapping up for the day, her phone buzzed.
It was James Benson.
"Miss Davis," he began, his tone hesitant, "I wanted to thank you again for how you've handled all this.
I've learned a lot over the past few weeks." Monica leaned back in her chair.
"I appreciate that, Mr. Benson, but this isn't about me, it's about creating a better environment for everyone."
"I understand," Benson said, "and I want you to know I've decided to step down.
I realize now that I was part of the problem, and it's time for someone else to lead who can bring fresh perspective."
Monica was quiet for a moment, surprised by his decision. "That's a brave choice, Mr. Benson. I hope you know this isn't about placing blame, it's about growth."
"I do," he said, "but growth sometimes means knowing when to step aside."
In the months that followed, Atlantic Air began to rebuild its reputation.
The new Accountability Committee, led by Monica, became a cornerstone of the company's efforts to foster transparency and fairness. Employees reported feeling more supported, and passengers noticed a shift in the way they were treated. For Monica, the journey had been exhausting, but it was worth every late night and difficult conversation. She had not only stood her ground but had also helped steer an entire organization toward a better future. As she boarded another flight for a business trip months later, Monica noticed a subtle but profound change. The gate agents greeted her with genuine warmth, not because of her title, but because it was now part of their culture. When she settled into her seat, Monica allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The battle might never truly be over, but for now, she had won a significant victory not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in fairness and dignity. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Dark Stories for more dramatic, thought-provoking stories. Your support fuels our passion for storytelling and shining a light on the issues that matter most. Thank you for watching.